That's a loaded question, isn't it? Yeah, I'm Brandon Mills, and at the moment, I am the owner of Total Promotion Company. It's a shop here in Vegas that specializes in physical branding. We do a bunch of different production techniques, such as embroidery, direct-to-film printing, which is a digital print process that allows us to do full color on any kind of fabric. Uh, we were one of the first to bring. Actually, we were the first to bring that technology to Nevada, and we've we've grown and expanded from there, and we're making a lot of cool stuff for people.
And how'd you get into that?
Uh, it's an interesting question too. So I was working in the oil industry in Texas, uh, selling my hours, selling a lot of my time. I maximized how much I could sell my time for, and then I sold as many hours as I could. And I was making a lot of money, uh, but I realized that money wasn't what was making me happy. I was in a situation with my now ex-wife where it just wasn't working out. It just wasn't having. It wasn't the life that I wanted to have. Uh, so I wanted to buy other people's hours. I didn't need to sell my time anymore. I wanted to have another product to sell, and that mindset shift kind of made me look towards other opportunities. And so when I left Texas and came back to Nevada, I kept my eyes open for whatever opportunity was open at the time, and I came across this shop that this older couple, they were running uh, pretty much what I'm doing now, but with really old technology. Uh, they had old equipment. They were running everything on QuickBooks Desktop. They weren't really in the 21st century, and I thought, you know what, I could probably take this and expand upon it and kind of take it a step further. And that's what I did. So I went all in financially into this business that I wanted to take and grow. And then 3 months later, lockdowns happened, and I was like, oh boy, my timing was way off. Uh, of course, that's my luck. Uh, in hindsight, looking at it, there's a lot of silver linings that forced us to do some things that would set us up for success later. I got into network marketing, uh, meeting people in the community, growing my name and reputation, uh, and then from there also understanding different niche markets. Uh, During that time of lockdowns, there were some winners in the market, and a lot of them were essential businesses, plumbers, electricians, people that were really bringing in a lot of money. Uh, we served them, so we were making uniforms, doing branding for physical branding for them, and it worked out great. And then as the economy started coming back, we started entering other niche markets, and from there, I mean, we were able to survive and then ultimately thrive. There's competitors that went out of business, and we absorbed their clients. And then bringing in new technology and being able to do uh, capabilities that other shops just couldn't do. We were able to, like right now, half of our business is wholesaling to other print shops that are doing stuff for their clients. And so we stay pretty busy. Those printers are constantly running.
Nice, nice. And to back up a little bit here, you were in the military,
I was,
right?
yeah.
Uh,
That's what brought me to Texas, actually. Yeah, I got out of the army at Fort Hood, and while I was getting out, while I was transitioning, I went to school to get my CDL, and right after I got out, I drove over the road for about 5 months, which is about probably 4 months too long. Uh, it was great. I loved the work. I loved driving, but the pay was awful, and I was away from home all the time, just selling my time once again. And and but that experience allowed me to transition into the oil industry. One of the guys that I served with in Korea, he brought me on at a company that was in Texas, and which ended up being fantastic. It was a great company to work for, but they ultimately sold our department to a third party vendor that would work for different oil companies. Whereas before we were only servicing our own oil, so our own oil production, and that transition also kind of made me rethink where I was and what I was doing.
Yeah. And so, what was your time in the military like? Like, when did you come in? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, so I came into the military kind of late. I was 27 years old. There's kids that were 10 years younger than I was running circles around me. But at that point, I had a really young child, and it was just coming out of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, and I'd just come back to the U.S. from Thailand. I had a speedboat charter business in Thailand for a while, and when my wife of the time got pregnant, it kind of changed my mindset, and it was no longer about me. I had to focus on bringing a child up in this world, and I didn't want to do that in Thailand. I thought that would limit his opportunities later on in life, and so we came back here, and there wasn't any jobs. I was like, oh shit, here we go. So I had a friend that I had gone to college with that had joined the military, and I hadn't really considered it before. I kind of always had this idea in my mind that I wanted to, especially when I was younger, and I just figured that I had passed that time up. But then it was kind of the perfect scenario and perfect situation. I was like, well, you know what? Let me go this route. Think it's something I can do, and it's something I'll be proud of. And so I went into the military, and they sent me right back to Korea, or they sent me right back to Asia, I should say. But I ended up getting command sponsored, so my family could come over. And then while we were there, the birth of my daughter, my second child, happened, and so they extended our time. So I was in Korea for about 3 years. Finally came back to the U.S., went to Fort Hood, and they asked me, where are you coming from? And I told them Korea, and they laughed, and they're like, don't unpack, we're going to Korea. I was like, oh great. But at that point, I had made the decision to ETS and to leave the military. I thought that it was holding me back from some things I was wanting to do in life, and so I was able to do one contract. I feel very fortunate that I never deployed to a hostile area, even though I was up on the DMZ for like 3 years. It was not a live combat area. So I mean, I went into the military during 2 wars, figuring that I would be, and I didn't. But I was a tanker, so tankers, are typically used for force-on-force battle. So they want to put tanks, up on the border of where there might be, a hostile country where there would be a force-on-force battle. So, and I was fortunate enough to stay on the tank the entire time as well.
Nice. And your time in the military, what were some lessons that you learned and things that you were able to bring from military life to where you are now?
A lot of it is going to be leadership. Coming in as an enlisted person, and coming up through those ranks, you get to experience the best and the worst of society. I met some of the best leaders I could have ever come across, and at the same time, I met some of the worst. And I feel like I took a little bit from each of them, understanding what it takes to be a leader from the good ones and what not to do from the bad ones. And then some things that you learn in the military that translate really well is, like, for instance, especially in my position where doing branding and production of physical products is attention to detail. There's so many variables that go into so many different things, and one little step, misstep can really mess you up. So, um, and that's also one of the reasons why I really like to hire veterans in my shop, is because you have that mission first mindset. Here, whereas we've got a project to do, it's got a deadline, we have to get it done no matter what, and we make it happen. But not only do we make it happen, you have to have a lot of attention to detail. So I feel like that mindset translates really well into what we're doing right now, and it has been a key to success in what we're doing.
And with that, what were some of your toughest challenges, while you were in the military, and then also some toughest challenges that you've had, in your civilian life?
Probably my toughest challenge was running. I don't run well. I can shoot great and I can do everything else. I would max out my push-ups and sit-ups, but my run was always just coming in under the wire. Never been a runner, but some of the bigger challenges was working in less than ideal conditions and having to follow orders that don't make sense. It's common sense goes right out the window in the military. There's to the point of complete idiocy. like, but surviving in that environment, you learn how to deal with it. And there's complete idiocy all over the world. It's just that I feel the military is really condensed. It's you get a lot of people trying to prove themselves and making decisions because they have to make a decision, but without looking at all the variables of what's going on. And I guess I don't know, you get some real dummies.
Was there anything specific, like, where you guys had a project or a mission or something you guys had to do?
There were a lot of training. So in especially in Korea, they had a fight tonight mindset and mentality, where if your tank was down, you stayed until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure that it was up and running. But then you have to be at PT at 6, so you miss your entire. You don't sleep, and that's no excuse. Being tired is there's no excuse. You can't be tired, even though they were the ones that kept you up all night. So there were times where it was frustrating because you're expected to perform despite challenges, and you just do it. You make it work, and it's not ideal, but you figure it out. And then in Korea, I mean, they have a lot of training, constantly training. I mean, it's not quite a war zone, but there is an enemy on the other side of a line, and they want to ensure that you're going to be in the best possible position if something were to happen. So the challenges were from a real threat, but the threat almost didn't seem real sometimes because you're out there. I mean, because it doesn't happen. I mean, like the Korean War, the ceasefire had taken place, decades and decades prior, and so Korea just ended up being a place to train, and that was it.
And so, with that, with like your military service, every branch has core values. Um, for you personally, what are some of your core values that you have, and how have you developed them over time?
Some of the core values are going to be integrity. I mean, just being honest with others and yourself about all situations. I feel integrity is probably one of the most important core values that anybody can have, and you can tell when someone has integrity or not, and who you want to have in your corner is going to be based on those values. And from there, integrity, honesty, and and goodwill is just it's super important, super important. But I feel like I went into the military with those values. Um, I don't know that everybody went into the military with those kind of values. Uh, and over time, you can tell too where people came in from all sorts of different backgrounds, and integrity can be instilled and learned. And I've seen it in soldiers and my soldiers, where they see that things aren't working out for them because they didn't have integrity, and then when they gave it a try, it worked. Like for instance, I had a soldier that came up to me and was like, "Sergeant, is it?" He's like, "Am I a shitbag?" I was like, "Yeah, kind of." But that's okay because the Army has a very short memory, and they remember the last thing you did. So if the last thing you did is, pretty bad, that's the way you're going to be viewed. And so he took that and complete 180, started started doing really well. I mean, he's still in the military to this day, doing great, has a career out of it. Whereas, before he just couldn't do anything right. But I think with that little mindset shift of and the understanding that the military does have a short memory, unless you really screw it bad, is allowed him to prosper and succeed.
That's cool. That's good. Um, so, as someone who's lived through significant historical events, you know, um, how do you perceive changes in society and the world today compared to when you were younger?
Well, I mean, where the historical significance, if you look at it in terms of patterns, uh, I mean, you can see where we are at based on what has happened before in our past. There's that line that, history is doomed to repeat itself, uh, especially if you're unaware of it. Uh, so understanding the historical significance of, whether it be something in your own family, there's a lot of generational issues that can happen, but on a macro level, uh, countries and societies that have risen and fallen throughout the world, throughout time, throughout history, uh, they all kind of have similar patterns. There's a book called The Fourth Turning, that is interesting, and it looks at time as being cyclical instead of linear. And when you look at the cycles, like for instance of where we are right now, and you look at the fall of previous empires, uh, you can kind of see where we're at and what's going to happen, uh, which is great because you can prepare for it. You know, like we're in a winter. You know, did you prepare in the fall? Are you going to have a bountiful spring? I think we're in a winter, or we're coming up into a really dark time. But I do feel that opportunity presents itself in those times as well. So I'm optimistic, whereas a lot of people, are doom and gloom. They think that if they don't have, you know, a higher power protecting them, that they're going to be in a bad way. Whereas you can look after yourself.
And how did you perceive those changes from when you were younger, how you looked at the world, and how you look at things now?
Yeah. So when you're younger, I mean, you look at things right in front of you. You don't really understand what's going on around the world. Uh, you know, you're more concerned about what's going on with your family or your friends. And it's a much more peaceful time, really, when your biggest concern is the flat tire on your bike. You know, I mean, I grew up in a very interesting. I guess I had a pretty interesting childhood in that we moved around all the time. Uh, I was always the new kid in schools, and back then, it's a little bit different now. I feel, but back then, the new kid was always challenged. and so I always had to fight. I always had to fight. Every school I went to, I had to fight. And once you got that out of the way, then then you can move forward. Um, but because of that, I feel like I can assess threats really well. I'm also very adaptable to different cultures. I'm able to go in and out of different areas and understand quickly who is a friend and who is a foe. Who has good intentions and who doesn't. I just almost have this innate ability to be able to look somebody in the eye and be able to tell right away. It's not always foolproof, uh, but it's served me well now. So looking at things as a child, where it's just like, okay, there's threats all the time. Now it's not nearly as bad as it was then, and so I feel like over time I've calloused up myself and allowed myself to be able to function successfully in various environments.
Okay. And on that note, what advice would you give to your younger self about navigating life, or maybe not
Mm.
yourself, just anybody younger? What advice would you give navigating life's challenges and pursuing the dreams?
Yeah, personal responsibility and independence is crucial. It's very important. You're not always going to have somebody there to save you. You've got to be able to rely on yourself. And another thing is when it comes to failure, it's not failure if you learn from it and are able to grow. It's when you can fall on your face and you keep getting up. You fall on your back, keep getting up. And you just keep getting up. But if you keep failing the same way and you never learn from it, that is the true failure. So it's keep trying different things, keep doing new things, find out what works, and when you find out something that works, repeat it, keep it, run it, grow from it. Because when you figure out what works, I mean, you don't wanna let that go. But you don't find out what works unless you try things.
Yeah. And speaking of that, so like when you were a kid, like what were some of your dreams and aspirations, and how did they evolve, over time?
What were my dreams and aspirations as a child? Um, I was kind of all over the place. I was an ADD kid that was medicated. It wasn't great. Uh, I do feel that because of the medications that I was constantly put on because of what they say ADD, it kind of messed me up a little bit in a way. Uh, Unfortunately, because there's a lot of my childhood that is just kind of blank, and I don't think about it a lot. Um, I did have a good childhood, but I do feel that there was a lot of misguidance when it came to how to deal with kids that are maybe a little bit more rambunctious than others. Uh, Look, the pharmaceutical industry has, they make a ton of money on treating the symptom rather than looking for the root cause of problems. So when I was a kid, man, it was just getting through. I hated high school. Hated it. It wasn't until I got to college and I got on my own, got off all those meds that I started really starting to come into my own person.
Yeah. And what was that like, for you to make that transition?
Oh, I couldn't. It couldn't come soon enough. I I I wanted to get out of my town. I wanted to get away from my parents. I couldn't launch fast enough. I I wanted to get out there and do it. And when I finally did, I mean I'm still on that journey. So it's I mean I've done some pretty wild things. In college, shoot, I went to UNR. It was great because I'm an avid skier, and so what a better place than being right outside of Lake Tahoe. Uh, but once I graduated college, I bought a one-way ticket to Moscow and traveled the Trans-Siberian Railway through Russia, down through Mongolia. Mongolia is awesome, by the way, if you ever get a chance. Uh, Down through China, and that's how I ended up. My goal was to be gone for a year, and I ended up being gone for 4. And I couldn't wait to explore the world. You know, I consider myself to be a cultural explorer. I'm fascinated by people, by societies, by things other than what I'm used to, and I want to eat it all up. It's great.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah.
When was that? Like what years did you?
That was right at the end of 2005. So it was like first couple days of 2006. So it was like January like 2nd, I think. I flew out to Moscow and navigated my way through Russia, which is very difficult. And it was in the middle of the winter too, so it was very cold. My goal was to go through Russia and up to the Harbin Ice Festival in China, but they closed down for their Christmas celebrations after the New Year, and so their international train stations were down, and I was way behind schedule. And I ended up in a town called Irkutsk, which is like central Russia, south central Russia, and and so I was able to find out that the train I was wanting to get was going to leave a week later. I was like, shit, well, my visa ends in like 2 days. And I really didn't want to spend time in a Russian jail, so looked at a map and I was like, well, I'm pretty close to Mongolia. I'd probably get out of this country as fast as possible. Not knowing anything about Mongolia other than Genghis Khan went around, destroying, half the world. I thought, okay, let's go there. And this is before smartphones and things. So you have to find internet cafes to communicate, with family back home. So nobody back home even knew I was going to Mongolia. So I was like, well, so I just went on my own to Mongolia and it ended up being wonderful. Spent a couple weeks there. Went out into the Gobi Desert when they shut down the youth hostel that I was at, and it was one other American guy and two guys from Switzerland, and we went all over the place. It was beautiful. And I could go into depth in that too, but
Yeah.
it would take a while. So.
How old were you when you did this?
Let's see. Early 20s.
Okay.
Yeah, early 20s.
So you just had a pocket full of money and just hitting the road.
Well, so I went to college on an academic scholarship, and my dad at the end of it, he's like, you still got $10,000 in your account for school that they'd saved, prior that I never touched, never used, and he thought, well, what do you want to do with it? Thinking that I would put money down on a car or something, and I said I wanted to travel, and so that's what I did. And I thought, with $10,000, being in my early 20s, I'm just gonna backpack it and rough it and see how long I can go. My goal was 1 year, and I ended up being gone for 4. So yeah, I ended up starting a family and running a business over there, and just I had no intention of ever coming back either. But it wasn't until I had my son that I was like, okay, let's come back to the U.S. There'll be more opportunities for him, if I do that. And I didn't want to limit, what my children, what opportunities my children might have.
Yeah. And so did you go from Mongolia to Thailand then?
Mongolia, this is all over land. So Russia, the Trans-Siberian Railway, which was a unique experience too, because you don't have any English, nobody speaks English. But I got on this train. I thought, okay, I'll get a bed car, a couple beds in there, and they got a shower car and a restaurant. And so the first day I was eating in the restaurant car. I was like, this is great. This is gonna be wonderful. And at the time I was smoking cigarettes, and I was in between where my car is and the car that I was just on eating, and all of a sudden it disconnected, and I was like, oh shit, because I didn't know he was going to do that. And if I was on that wrong car, I would have been, away from all my stuff that was in the room. And so from then on, I did not leave my car. I showered, I did baby wipe showers. Anytime we were at a train station, I would just buy whatever food out the window for anybody that was hawking food, because I didn't trust leaving that car and leaving all my stuff and ending up in some other place in Russia that I did not intend to. So. Yeah, it was pretty cool. So we went down through Mongolia, and then I took a train into China. Spent some time in Beijing. Went down to Shanghai, then went overland to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong I took a flight to Bangkok. So yeah, it was quite a journey.
And then, so how did you end up starting your business? Was it in Bangkok?
No, it was on Koh Phangan. It was where they had the full moon party. It was in the Gulf of Thailand on a tropical island. So yeah, so I had a speedboat charter business on a tropical island, which a lot of people would aspire to, and I did it, and I did it young. It didn't make hardly any money. I bought this speedboat, this Thai-made wooden speedboat. It had what was it, 250 horsepower Yamaha motor on it, and it could take 17 total people, which I hated taking that many people on it just because it was too packed. But I'd take families out, groups of friends out for fishing, snorkeling, that kind of stuff. And I mean, the cost of living was so low. I was staying in a one-bedroom house, had a kitchen, bathroom, and it was like $100 a month, including utilities. And it was about 100 yards from the beach. And so it didn't cost anything to live there, and I didn't really require much. I mean, I was young kid in my 20s, and so we're just eking by a living on an island, and it was great. It was a good time. There's a lot of challenges with that too. There's nothing you can. That's one of the things too, is you learn that there's nothing in life that are without its challenges, and the challenges have become very unique too. So dealing with the mafia, dealing with the government, kind of working within their rules, so that you can operate, and like their full moon parties, I wasn't allowed to. This wasn't a government thing. This was the mafia thing. They said don't work on that night because that's where they made all their money. And they're like, you can work the rest of the month. We don't care. And then the government, they would pull you over and extort you. And so I had to pay for an engineer's license and a captain's license to a government official under the table to get these licenses, which then prevented the police from being able to extort me while we were on the water. So there's a lot of unique challenges, but you know what? You're gonna have challenges, and that's part of it. It's fun.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of things that people don't really understand when they travel from the United States. Is that kind of corruption from government and the local.
It was so much simpler. Sometimes you wish it could be that simple here, but it's the corruption here is at a much higher level.
Yeah. And so on that, you're wearing your Libertarian Party hat.
No, this is actually a Sacred Soldier hat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a couple of weeks ago. I did a retreat with a bunch of veterans, and it's ayahuasca retreat.
Okay.
And I am a firm believer that it is going to save lives. They estimate 22 suicides a day, from veterans and people dealing with deep-rooted, deep-seated traumas that they're just not able to work through. People stuck with PTSD, in a fight or flight response that affects their everyday, it affects every situation that they're in, because they haven't been able to deal with and process, some of the traumas that they've experienced. They repress it as much as possible, but yet it's, it surfaces at the worst possible times. So this is a whole new thing that's been developed. Sacred Soldier. It's an organization for veterans to go through these very structured, very safe way of using ancient medicines, that have been around for thousands of years, to heal your mind and spiritually and physically. I mean, it's incredible. So I'm a big advocate of being able to help veterans and anybody. I mean, the whole country, the whole world's in a mental health crisis right now with all the craziness going on. And what's even crazier is you've got a lot of restrictions and regulations that don't benefit the people. They're prevented from treating themselves. So yeah, it's kind of a gray area legally because of how they categorize some of these medicines, but it's done through a church. It's done through and the medicine is a sacrament, and it I I'm a firm believer that it's already saving lives, and if we can get more people through this kind of treatment, that it's going to fulfill their lives in such a way, in such a profound way, to where they can move past some of the things that has happened in their past.
And what kind of things did you personally see and experience for yourself and others that you were with during that?
Sure. Uh, it's interesting because without going into too much detail, uh, the community aspect of it, we went through with 6 people, and everybody was able to, have a complete trust with each other. And, prior to some of the ceremonies that were going on, we shared, some of our deepest and darkest traumas that we had experienced. Stuff that you wouldn't typically lead with, and without having a level of trust with the person next to you. And I was blown away by what it had done, like afterwards, and the processing that people were able to undertake, to where like they realized it's something that happened, but it's not going to affect their lives moving forward. And it it's beautiful. It's an incredibly beautiful thing that and watching that transformation take place. It's something that I want to be a part of and help others to experience.
Yeah. So you had a big shift for you.
It big shift for me, yes and no. I mean, you don't ever want to compare your traumas to other people's traumas, because everybody experiences life in a very different way, and they experience traumas in a very different way. Um, I feel like I was fairly grounded going into it. For me, it was more about understanding and curiosity. I wanted to be able to go through this to understand what it is, so that I could then advocate, for or against it, from personal experience. And I'm a big advocate for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so with the advocacy, where do you go now with that?
So they've got their second retreat's coming up in October, and I've got a friend that I served with in Korea who suffers greatly from PTSD, and he's I talked to him. He said this is probably one of the toughest years he's ever had. He's got a plane ticket to come down here, and I'm gonna go through it with him, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be able to lead him through this, and I'm even more excited to see the positive effects that it'll have on his life, and being able to move forward and improve himself and his life, for the better.
Yeah. And I've seen, through our personal network, some of
Yeah.
the proposed legislation,
Mhm.
to get these things to be able to be more mainstream. Is that something you're familiar with?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's the Nevada Coalition of Psychedelic Medicines. I started to meet the guy. I've dipped my toe into politics, in into dealing with legislation and reform. I've gone up during sessions as a unpaid lobbyist, for veterans. I ran for state senate in the last election cycle, and but when I ran for state senate in the last election cycle, it was more using it as a platform to express my grievances as a business owner and what they tried to do to us during lockdowns.
Yeah. And do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So in March 2020, yeah, it was March 2020. Just not even 3 months from when I had acquired my business, uh, lockdowns came and they said, okay, only essential businesses. In fact, I've got a memorandum that I wrote and had notarized. At that point, I was still very familiar with writing memorandums because I did in the military, and it highlighted how we were essential, because we were supply chain logistics for police departments, for hospitals who were our clients. Didn't say that we were making stress balls and water bottles for them. Supply chain logistics is supply chain logistics. Twice we were checked by government officials to see if we were essential. One of them, the times they said that somebody called on us, that we were operating. So fortunately, we were able to stay open and running. A lot of people didn't have that luxury. And in fact, a lot of our clients didn't even bother to come pick up the products that they had already paid for that were completed. They didn't need them anymore. The events were canceled. Their businesses had gone under. It's like, my goodness, how in the world can any government agency prevent anybody from making a life for themselves? I mean, I'm making shirts for people that want them. It's it's not a life or death thing, and the fact that they wanted to shut down the economy and generational businesses had gone under, and for what? And especially now that you can look on hindsight at how it wasn't even the threat that they had claimed that it was. But regardless, even if it was a major threat, the bigger threat was what they did to the economy and the absolute destruction of people's businesses and livelihoods. And then they just went on a printing money campaign and rampage of just like using the Federal Reserve to expand the monetary supply. And now people are like, "Well, what's all this inflation from?" Well, that's what happens when when you expand the monetary supply. Is the value of that dollar becomes less, and so prices go up. It's not the greedy corporations. Their prices are go up too, from the very start. So it's a lot of people don't have an understanding of economics in that sense. But no, I wanted to use running for state senate as a platform to be able to tell directly to the people that had done this to us, my thoughts and how if I have anything to do with it, I'm not gonna allow it.
Yeah. Do you have any future political aspirations or involvement?
Well, I just answered this question the other day actually. Only if they come after me again. So I feel like I'm a dormant beast at the moment, and if they want to poke at me and poke at me and poke at me, and continue to make my life difficult for myself and for my family, yeah, I'll become political again. But is it a fight they want? Do they want to keep poking me, or just leave me alone? Leave me alone. Leave me alone to eke out this existence, and we'll be just fine. Yeah, continue to make things difficult, and yeah, I'll run again, and I'll expose all of it.
So when you look at like your relationships in the community and the political campaign, your military, your business, can you share any stories where you've had like these really meaningful relationships that have had a really profound impact on you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the relationships in the community. I mean, it's what it's all built on. It's we're tribal by nature. It's if the society were to collapse, we would go back to tribalism. And the great thing is I've got a great tribe. It's awesome. I mean, there's incredible people, and it's always expanding and it's always growing. And regardless of what happens, I know that we've got each other's back. It's I mean, during those lockdowns is when I networked as hard as I could. I was like, I found my people, and it was the people that had to also hustle to make it, and those were the people that I wanted to be around. And through that process, I mean, that's the silver lining to the lockdowns is you find out who the real people are. Whereas you might not have had the opportunity to find out, how people really are, given, in a situation that, doesn't doesn't allow them to present themselves in that way.
Yeah. My last question here, really.
Yeah.
Go as deep as you want. So when you reflect on your life, what do you hope will be your most significant contribution or legacy, and how would you like to be remembered?
Mm, that is a good question. Hmm. Phrase it again.
Your most significant contribution or legacy,
Mm-hmm.
and how would you want to be remembered?
I feel like in order for me to make the most contribution is I have to become the best person that I can, and I'm still on that journey. Uh, I mean, there's so many different ways to contribute. Uh, First of all, as a father, I mean that means the world to me. Having my children become good people is the most important, and I really hope that through example, I can lead them. They're teenagers now, so I'm not cool, but I'm hoping they're watching and learning because the they mean the world to me. That's the most important thing to me is my family. And all the rest of it, is just kind of not as important. Um, Being remembered, I mean, I would love to be remembered for being a good person. I mean, the contributions that I'm making are, I guess, paving a way that others are able to follow. I hope that the things that I'm doing are something that can be admired. Uh, I mean, everybody stumbles. I'm not without my faults, uh, and I try to work on my faults. But I would like to think that uh, I would like to think that I'd be remembered for for being a man of integrity. Like coming back to the beginning is it's it's important to me. Uh, yeah, I don't want to be remembered as an asshole. I am an asshole sometimes, but I like to think that if I am an asshole, there's reason and purpose behind it. Um, I mean, running for state senate, you know, I feel like you have to have the right asshole in the right place. So uh, I want people to understand that you have to take responsibility for yourself. There's no there's no easy ticket. It's going to be challenging. It's freaking difficult. But there's beauty in that. There's beauty in getting through life. Uh, I mean, there's been times where my own mind have gone to very dark places, and you just get so tired and fed up with all the bullshit, and it's coming at you all the time. It's like you're being hit by waves over and over and over again. But as you get through it and become stronger, it gets easier. And it's one of those things that you hope that your impact on the ones around you are the most important. So I don't care if I'm remembered by, you know, the world. I don't need to make that large of an impact. I just need to make a large impact on my tribe, my community, my family. You know, ultimately, you know, I'm doing it for myself. It's like the airplane thing. You know, you got to put your mask on before you can save anybody else. Uh, so continuing to work on myself, improve myself, and to be an example for not only my kids but for others. And hopefully, I can do that. I don't know if I will or not, but you know, that's what I strive for.
Perfect. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's good.